I've never seen such strange zombies. They put an object on the ground after infecting someone, like they're performing some sort of mystical after-dinner ritual. Their hunting method is also unique. They don't bite on sight, but stare at you from a distance. This creepy spectacle would make any sensible person run away, but there are always those who insist on continuing the adventure, not realizing that they have fallen into a trap set by the zombies. A shot rang out and Wisner was bitten. Although Wisner killed the zombie in time, he was also infected with the zombie virus. Soon, more zombies appear behind him and Wisner has no choice but to run away. The zombies continue to chase him, but luckily, they eventually get away from the horde. By the time they reach safety, Wisner has died from his injuries. To prevent mutation, Bonin takes Vizina's body back to the camp. Bonin gave the axe to the survivor at the gate to dispose of Vizina's body. After all, they were brothers who had experienced life and death together, and Bonin could not bear to do so. Just as Bonin was about to leave, he noticed a strange woman tied to the bed. The survivors told him that she had been taken in by them because she had injuries on her body. The survivors were worried that she had been bitten by a zombie, so they had tied her up for the time being. However, after Bonin questioned her carefully and examined her from every angle, he was convinced that the woman wasn't lying and untied her. But just as they were about to walk out, they realized that the survivor at the door was gone. Feeling uneasy, Bonin got into his car, ready to escape at a moment's notice. After a few minutes of watching, there was still no movement in the jungle, suggesting that the survivor may have left for good. However, just as they were about to leave, the zombie-turned survivor suddenly attacked them. Bonin quickly backed up and accelerated away. More zombies appear from the jungle, indicating that they have been waiting for their arrival for a long time. Just as the two let their guard down, a zombie suddenly grabbed Tanya from behind. Luckily, Bonin gave his gun to Tanya in time, and she quickly disposed of the zombie with a single shot. When they reached safety, Bonin stopped the car and dragged the body out. But just as they returned to the car to rest, a soldier jumps out. It turns out to be Max, the neighbor's son, who has returned from the army. Bonin tells Max about the zombie virus outbreak in the town and warns him not to go back alone. But Max insists on walking back alone, so the two have to leave by car. They arrive at a farm with the intention of finding some supplies. However, instead of finding any supplies, they find a surviving little girl. This strained their already limited food supply, but they couldn't just let her die. So, their three makeshift families continued on their journey of survival. As night fell, they had no choice but to find a place to spend the night. The next day, Tanya had just finished using the restroom when she heard a loud noise. Since zombies are sensitive to sound, Tanya didn't dare to act rashly and could only hide in the bushes. But just as Tanya poked her head out and looked out, a zombie spotted her and Tanya rushed to escape. Unfortunately, she was still pounced by the zombie, but fortunately Bonin pulled the zombie away in time. The bewildered few had just gotten into the car and were ready to continue on their journey when Max showed up. To their surprise, Max is still alive, but due to his reckless behavior, he may not last much longer. However, Max brought a message that something strange had happened on the road ahead. Upon hearing this news, Bonin grabbed his gun and headed to the place Max had mentioned. The sight in front of him surprised Bonin. The zombies were standing in a field, building a tall structure out of scraps. Just as Bonin's eyes stared unblinkingly at the sight before him, a zombie spotted him. It seemed to give off some sort of signal, and Bonin rushed to escape. Just as they got into the car, the zombie horde followed them, but when they got in the car and drove away, the zombies stopped chasing them. Bonin then drives to Therese's house. It turns out that Wisner is Therese's son. Learning that her son is dead and that her husband died not long ago, Therese is on the verge of an emotional breakdown, but before she can grieve for too long, Bonin tells her what he has seen, and it is clear that the area is no longer safe. After some discussion, they decide to leave for the city early the next morning, but something unexpected happened that night. Therese, who was on duty, suddenly heard strange noises coming from the forest. She immediately informed the others.
J'ai entendu quelque chose.
Bonin was about to go and investigate when the sound came closer and closer. Immediately afterward, the roar of zombies came. It seemed that their evacuation plan had to be accelerated. As they escaped through the back door, the zombie horde rushed in through the front door. They ran through the grassland and into the forest. As the zombies got closer and closer, they had no choice but to hide. Bonin is quickly spotted by the zombies and has to fight them off while retreating. Tanya is also jumped by a zombie, but luckily Zoe behind her arrives in time. Tanya takes over the knife and finishes off the zombie, but just as they catch their breath, another zombie appears in front of them. That's when Celine appeared and saved them as the sound of gunshots and the roar of the zombies echoed through the forest. After a night of intense fighting, they all miraculously survived. After a moment's rest, they continue their journey, but on the way, they encounter Max again, but this time, he's not so lucky. Instead of scaring everyone, Max was mistaken for a zombie and shot by Tanya. This shows that recklessness can lead to a person's death. After a few seconds of mourning, the group arrives at the zombie stronghold. Here, they unlocked a new skill. If they stood still like zombies, they wouldn't be detected. Using this method, they managed to break through the most dangerous area. Along the way, they met 2 more survivors and formed a new team. After all, there was strength in numbers. On their way to the city, they came across a house where Therese found a note on the table of the house. The note warns them not to travel to the city, as it too has fallen. With their only hope dashed, they decide to rest and look for food in the woods. However, what they don't realize is that Real, whom they have just taken in, has been infected and Tycho becomes his target. A scream alerts everyone and Celine rushes over to kill the zombie that attacked Tycho. But to their surprise, Pauline, who was guarding the outside, was also ambushed by the zombies. In an instant, they lost 3 of their team members and had to kill the near-mutated Tycho and Pauline. The rest of the team found a warehouse with electricity but no food and had to continue on their way. As the fog thickens, Celine sees a woman sitting in the bushes and hears a baby crying. She thinks it's a survivor, but walks in and realizes it's a walker holding a baby toy. Apparently, they had fallen into a walker trap. As the fog cleared, a tall structure of tables and chairs appeared in the field. Before they could react, they were surrounded by a large group of walkers. Celine swings her machete as more walkers appear and they are overwhelmed. Bonin grabs Zoe and Tanya and escaped, while Therese chose to stay. Bonin looks back and understands Therese's intentions. Not everyone will make it out alive. Celine also chose to stay and fight the zombies to buy time for the others. She wielded her machete and quickly eliminated a few zombies, but there were more and more zombies and she was eventually overwhelmed. Bonin then moved up to cover the 2 and led the zombies towards the warehouse. Tanya and Zor then made their way to the sewers, and once Tanya had settled Zor, she was ready to return to Bonin, but shortly after Tanya leaves, a zombie mistakenly enters the sewers. The helpless Zor could only cover his ears where he was, and by the time Zor raised his head, the zombie was already in front of him. Luckily, Tanya came back and she used her accordion to distract the zombie. Having escaped, Zoe walks out of the sewers, and when Zoe arrives at the warehouse, the floor has long been covered in corpses, and Bonin has been tragically bitten in the fight. Learning that Tanya will likely die trying to save Zoe, he tells Zoe to get out of there. Zoe picks Bonin's gun and sets out on her own to survive. On the way, Zoe sees the accordion that Tanya dropped, and it appears that Tanya is dead. Zoe walks down the highway holding what the 2 left behind. Luckily, a passing race car driver meets Zoe and eventually leaves the horrible place. The movie ends with Bonin finding the mutated Tanya and the 2 standing next to a building made of tables and chairs and living as zombies ever after.